So, like the term awakening, there is not a consensus on the meaning of the word enlightenment. Many people use them to mean the same thing. Um, some people seem to prefer awakening because it doesn't carry some of the, high level laudatory baggage that enlightenment maybe sounds like it has. For someone to say they're enlightened sounds so much bigger than to say they're just awakened. So it's a tricky word, and I tend to use it very judiciously. But in order to distinguish between how I would use awakening as a term or enlightenment is based upon the development of specific realizations, which for enlightenment, in that case, have the character of light and radiance. Someone can have a shift of identity. Their sense of self has changed. Whatever that shift is, whether it's prior to self-realization, or after self-realization, that shift can be modest. It can not flashy in any way. It can just be just like a matter of fact. There was this shift, and now my sense of self, my principal sense of being, has changed. But for me to use the term enlightenment requires the realization of light and radiance. And there are different layers, if you will, of light and radiance. In self-realization, someone may experience the light of consciousness, the sense that there is a kind of luminosity. They may experience it in the head, or they may experience it behind the head, or some part of the body, or maybe they can't even quite localize it. But it's a character of luminosity of consciousness itself. And it is, in a sense, the light that illuminates experience and perception. But not everyone has that. But for me to begin to put something in a category of enlightenment, this character of luminosity has to begin to be present. And then a further development of that light is the recognition of what I call the divine heart of being and its brilliance. And it is a gateway, if you will, to the divine, where the light of the divine is penetrating into existence. And so one can be aware of that, not necessarily have moved into that, we'll loosely call space of the divine heart of being, but can be aware of that light, and it's recognized as a different order of light. And then that can develop into being able to see through that gateway through the divine heart of being and to the radiance and power of the divine itself. But there's the real sense of that being present, and that being the source light of existence and of any sense we may have of who we are. And then at some point, one makes the transition, what we would say is the scope of being or the scope of consciousness. And then in that case, one then goes beyond consciousness into this realm of the divine itself. And then in that place, this radiance and power of the divine is, I guess you could say, an all-time reality. I'm not quite sure how to explain it. We're getting into stuff, or I'm getting into stuff that's really challenging to actually talk about with any detail. But it's trying to answer this question of how I distinguish enlightenment from awakening. And I would say it's not enlightenment until it begins to express these characteristics of light and radiance. And at that point, one has stepped into enlightenment, and then there's still further unfoldment from there. It's not, the process doesn't ever end. It just keeps going on and on. But this is what I would say is the threshold between something I would call an awakening and something I would call enlightenment. And so going back to the facets of what awakening is, identity, clarity, and maturity, this process of becoming aware of and moving into this light is a process of clarity. So someone could go through all of the most commonly known or understood stages of awakening without that light, without that clarity, before moving into that clarity. So again, the process unfolds so differently for different people. But this is what I would say is the difference between awakening and enlightenment.